Now, the Ahsoka series has just finished with a mediocre finale, and the response for the show is certainly mixed, which, to be honest, is something I could say about any of the last 5 Disney Plus Star Wars shows. But despite a less than thunderous applause for Ahsoka, and despite the fact that I loved Andor, it's clear to me that Ahsoka is the better Star Wars show. Now, it's beyond doubt that Andor has better dialogue than Ahsoka.
I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Should I be? What? Worried? Nope.
In Andor, every character is nuanced and written to within an inch of their life. From Marva,
I've never loved anything the way I love you. And I've never fretted on anything more, but this time, you can't stay and I can't go.
to Mon Mothma,
I know they watch me, and I want that. Because as long as everyone thinks I'm an irritation, there's a good chance they'll miss what I'm really doing.
and Luthen Rael.
What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them.
Andor is actually my favourite show. Not just my favourite series set in a Star Wars universe, but my favourite series full stop over the last 5 years. It sits at first place on my series leaderboard, and I don't think it will be knocked off the top spot anytime soon. Whereas Ahsoka currently sits in 10th place on my leaderboard. So you may ask, why have I titled the video Why Ahsoka is Better Than Andor as a Star Wars show, when I clearly prefer Andor? Is it just for clickbait, or am I being purposefully obtuse? Well, no. The important part in the title is, as a Star Wars series. I think it's objectively true that Andor is a better series, but Ahsoka is a better Star Wars series. And let me explain why. Firstly, let's look at what makes Star Wars, well, Star Wars. Not just since Disney's takeover, but in its almost 50-year lifetime. You might say, lightsabers, or the Force, or ship battles, even revolutionary special effects, or maybe the characters, Darth Vader and Luke, Han Solo, Princess Leia, the Emperor, Obi-Wan, Darth Maul, Boba Fett, Stormtroopers, and clones. Or perhaps Star Wars is defined by its epic moments, such as Darth Vader's reveal to Luke,
No, I am your father.
Order 66, or Vader's redemption, sacrificing himself to save his son. So let's look at the plots of Andor and Ahsoka to see which one features more of these quintessential Star Wars elements. Andor is about the forming of the Rebel Alliance, with a large ensemble cast of flawed characters, from mechanics on Ferrix to politicians and art collectors on Coruscant. The characters negotiate the oppressive tyranny of the Empire and deal with the day-to-day harsh reality of Palpatine's dictatorship. A gritty, mature adventure from the point of view of the young, complex protagonist, Cassian Andor, who murders 2 security officers within the first 10 minutes. Andor then finds himself in prison and eventually back on the streets of Ferrix, as he sparks the fires of rebellion in the planet's civilians. And Ahsoka's plot is as follows. Former Jedi Knight Ahsoka, who was trained by Anakin Skywalker, reunites with her Mandalorian Padawan, Sabine Wren. They clash against lightsaber-wielding foes as they enter a new galaxy far, far away, to deal with an ominous threat that lurks over the fledgling New Republic. During Ahsoka's quest to find Ezra, a young Jedi once thought to be lost, and Grand Admiral Thrawn, an immensely intelligent and tactically brilliant leader in the Empire, Ahsoka deals with the burden of being a teacher to her apprentice, her guilt for the part she played in Anakin's turn to the dark side, Sith Inquisitors, and a threatening space station with unknown technological capabilities. The Ahsoka series has a focus on the mythical light side and dark side of the Force. With Sabine's struggle to use the Force, The World Between Worlds, The Mortis Gods, and Night Sister Force Magic. So which of these sounds more Star Wars to you? The space adventure with lightsabers, Master and Padawan, the Skywalker legacy, and ship battles? Or the gritty drama from the view of smaller, more realistic, everyday side characters? Yes, there are similar Star Wars themes in Andor, with Cassian being an orphan, who unintentionally falls into the rebellion's struggle with the Empire, and the underdog rebels of Luthen, Saw Gerrera, Mon Mothma, and Marva, fighting against a technologically superior Empire, who comprise of men with British accents.
I want every star sector and planetary emergency retaliation plan in the building ready for presentation by midnight.
But I think it's quite evident that everything that Star Wars is known for is at the forefront of the Ahsoka show. There are lightsaber fights galore in almost every episode, a master and an apprentice on the light side, and their counterparts on the dark. There are starships with the Rebel fleet, the Eye of Sion and Thrawn Star Destroyer. It's got Hayden Christensen as Anakin, X-Wings and their orange-suited pilots, hyperspace travel, and a real sense of mystery and mythology. Almost every important plot point, character, and setting is inspired by previous Star Wars shows or films. Whereas Andor takes place in the Star Wars galaxy, but it's very much its own thing. It's a fantastically written and fantastically acted action drama, which just happens to be in a galaxy far, far away. Setting the tone. The first 5 minutes of a series are often the most important, as that's a show's shop window to try and get viewers to buy into their series. It should set the tone, hint at the overall premise, and introduce the main characters. And the first 5 minutes of Andor and Ahsoka perfectly encapsulate how biometrically different the two series are. Let's look at the first 3 minutes of the Ahsoka series. First off, we get a classic Star Wars opening crawl, followed by a massive spaceship slowly making its way through space in one of the most blatant homages to the original trilogy. Whereas in Andor, in the first 5 minutes, we follow Cassian as he arrives at a brothel. Then he kills 2 security officers, one by accident and one in cold blood. Andor shoots him in the back of the head as he's kneeling in the rain, begging for mercy. Now Andor's opening completely gripped me, because it introduced us to perhaps the most complex character we've seen in Disney Star Wars. But another reason why it instantly grabbed my attention was because it was very different from what we've come to expect from George Lucas's franchise. Unlike Andor, the Ahsoka series is inseparable from the Star Wars galaxy it's set in. Every episode mentions a legacy character, every scene wipe, every line of dialogue, it just screams Star Wars. That's one of the key reasons why I believe it's a better Star Wars show than Andor. It recaptures the magic of the originals. Not in a copy and paste cash grab way, but in a truly passionate and reverential manner. The homages to the originals and prequels are so frequent that it may be easier to name the moments which aren't in a similar tone, or invoke scenes from the first 6 Star Wars films. And to give an example of this, we need look no further than the first 3 minutes of the first episode of Ahsoka. After the opening crawl and a slow establishing shot of the ship, just like in A New Hope, we see Baylan and Shin exit their shuttle, and it's exactly the same as Darth Vader's first scene in Return of the Jedi. Then seconds later, when Baylan and Shin walk towards the New Republic security team, it's reminiscent of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's opening scene in A Phantom Menace, with their robes on and their hoods up. And then just seconds later, this line from Obi-Wan,
"You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short,"
is paralleled by Baylan.
You're right about one thing, Captain. We are no Jedi.
This level of respect and callbacks to old Star Wars made Ahsoka feel more Star Wars-y in its first 3 minutes than in Andor's entire 12-episode season. The Ahsoka series in itself is a giant Easter egg to past Star Wars. There are callbacks to every film of George Lucas's 2 trilogies. We've got Sabine training whilst wearing a helmet, with Ahsoka pushing her to tap into the Force, just like Luke in A New Hope. Ahsoka being rescued, mentioning her old master in Episode 5, just like Luke did when Han saved him on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back. In Episode 6, we have a wide shot of stormtroopers as Grand Admiral Thrawn walks through the middle, just like Vader and the Emperor do in Return of the Jedi. Then on to the prequel-inspired scenes, we've got Shin's probe droid spying on Sabine, in the same way that Darth Maul's probe did in The Phantom Menace. We've got the clones fighting in a dusty, smoky battleground with gunships and atties, just like in Attack of the Clones. Then we've got Hayden Christensen's return and fight against Ahsoka, where he uses similar strikes to his fight with Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. The Ahsoka show takes the epic moments that we all remember from the films and incorporates them into a new story. That's why it feels so much like the Star Wars we all remember. 2 very different creators. Andor's creator, Tony Gilroy, expressed how he wanted to make Andor for Star Wars resistant audiences.
Our mandate was to make a new lane, try to bring in an audience that may be Star Wars reluctant or Star Wars resistant.
Andor feels divergent to the rest of Star Wars because that's what it was intended to be. Tony Gilroy has said on numerous occasions that Andor was specifically set out to avoid fan service and stand by itself as a realistic and grounded show. Gilroy also said that he's not a Star Wars fan, and that not being a fan helped him to remove himself from decades of Star Wars lore and the expectations and pressure that comes with working on a Star Wars project. He also said that when working on Rogue One, actors, writers and directors would change their behaviour due to their fondness and awe of the franchise. But Gilroy himself was able to treat Andor like his previous projects, really focusing in on the characters and making it as real and down to earth as possible, and not less starstruck by the cultural significance of Star Wars. And this was certainly to the show's benefit, as it smashed past the self-referential and repetitive wall that many other Star Wars shows have been stuck behind. So what this means is that it isn't necessary to the plot that Andor's even in the Star Wars galaxy. It could be set in Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, and you wouldn't have to change much at all. Star Wars was essentially a superficial coating for Andor, adding in droids, stormtroopers, and the occasional TIE fighter. The Star Wars universe was supplementary to the series, but it certainly wasn't fundamental to the show's premise or even the show's success. On the other hand, we have the creator of the Ahsoka show, Dave Filoni, heir apparent to George Lucas. Now most know Filoni's journey at Lucasfilm goes a long way back, from the 2008 Clone Wars movie, to the animated Clone Wars TV show, to Rebels, The Mandalorian, Tales of the Jedi, and now Ahsoka. With almost 20 years at Lucasfilm, Filoni predates the company's current president, Kathleen Kennedy, and he's a figure that many hardcore Star Wars fans have pinned their hopes on, to potentially return Star Wars back to its glory days. So quite frankly, Filoni is Mr. Star Wars.
If I wasn't sitting here, I swear to God, and people say it, and I think we all know, I would be out there. I've been out there.
So the difference between Gilroy, who by his own admission is not a Star Wars fan, and Filoni, who has been living and breathing Star Wars day in, day out for at least the last 2 decades. Making a show, especially one which takes up years of your life, is often a very personal process, and the creator of the series, whether intended or not, will impress their feelings, beliefs, and their influences onto their show. And this is so evident with Andor and Ahsoka. Gilroy is a perfectionist, who created the characters and dialogues first and encased it inside a Star Wars setting, whereas Dave Filoni continued on the legacy of Star Wars, prioritising the world and the lore that George Lucas had established, and ensuring that each character was shaped by the events of the Star Wars timeline that came before, with Order 66, Palpatine, Anakin, the Jedi Order, and the Rebellion all being crucial parts of every character in the show. Characters. Let's take a look at the characters from these two shows, starting off with Ahsoka. First, we have Marek, the quiet, menacing Sith warrior who has a double-bladed red lightsaber. Remind you of anyone? We have Baylan, the ex-Jedi, who left the temple at around the time of Order 66, acting much like Vader with his brute strength and glimpses of his troubled past as a Jedi. Then there's Shin, his power-hungry Padawan, and Morgan Elsbeth, the Night Sister Witch, who uses dark side magic to communicate across galaxies and has the power to reanimate dead Sith Inquisitors. And if we look at Andor's villains, we have Dedra, an up-and-coming Imperial officer, Partagaz, a bureaucratic ISB officer, and Cyril, an obsessive, lonely ex-security officer. Then if we look at the protagonist of the two shows, we have Ahsoka, Padawan of the Chosen One himself, Anakin Skywalker, and for Andor we have, well, Cassian Andor, adopted son of Marva the Smuggler. Then looking at the rest of the protagonists, we have the wisecracking British droid Huyang, similar in look to C-3PO, and the Padawan and Master dynamic of Ahsoka and Sabine reproduces a relationship between Obi-Wan and Luke, or Obi-Wan and Anakin. Whereas Andor focuses on the gritty behind-the-scenes characters who helped form the rebellion: Andor, Luthen, Bix, Vel, Marva, and Cleia. Ahsoka deals with the legacy of Anakin, the future of the Empire, and the very nature of the Force. It's a multiple galaxy-spanning, action-adventure sci-fi, whereas Andor is a more contained, sometimes noir, sometimes heist, and sometimes prison break story. And what's more Star Wars than Jedi using the Force, facing off against Sith, and dealing with the legacy of what came before. Ahsoka has to deal with Anakin's flaws and failures, just as Luke had to in the original trilogy. Now it's worth mentioning again that I am not trying to undermine the characters and performances from Andor, as I loved every second of that series. I make this comparison of the two series only to show which characters seem more in line with Star Wars characters of the past, and which series offers the fun action-adventure heroes and villains that Star Wars is known for. Is it the three Siths of Baylan, Shin and Marek, the Darkside Witch Morgan Elsbeth, the three Great Mothers and Grand Admiral Thrawn from Ahsoka, or the security officers of varying ranks with Dedra, Partagaz and Cyril? Which series is going to sell more 3.75-inch action figures? Which characters will inspire young boys and girls? And which characters will adults dress up as at Star Wars Celebration? Well, the answer is clear. The characters from Ahsoka are more in line with previous Star Wars characters we all know and love. They are more accessible than those in Andor, and are new shiny renditions of classic Star Wars archetypes. If you had to buy a Star Wars figure for yourself or for someone you know, are you going for Ahsoka or Luthen, Baylan or Dedra? The future of Star Wars. So the last section of this comparison is to look ahead at what effect Andor and Ahsoka will have on the future of Star Wars. Now Andor is contained between episode 3 and 4, and shows us the formation of the rebellion and Andor's role within it. So it's a contained story that explains the early events of the Empire and the Rebel Alliance. But it's a closed chapter. We already know that Andor dies in Rogue One, and we know that the Empire falls and the Rebels win. So however great Andor was, and however great Season 2 may be, it's not going to change the future of Star Wars. It would be like Game of Thrones having an amazing season set between Season 1 and 2, where we follow the lesser known members of the Bolton family. It may be a fantastic season that helps us to appreciate Roose and Ramsay Bolton, but it doesn't change the ending to Game of Thrones. But with the Ahsoka series, yes, there's the unfortunate inevitability of the sequels, but there is a wider space between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And the introduction of the New Beyond and the planet Peridia essentially provides a way to bypass the sequels and start a new galaxy far, far, far away. We are exploring the world between worlds, Night Sister dark magic, and Balin's quest for greater power, which could lead him to the Mortis gods. All of these expand the mythology of Star Wars. And most importantly, we have Dave Filoni's film, which the Ahsoka series is sort of a trailer for. And with a average to good debut season, I for one am still quite excited to see Filoni's movie, which is effectively an adaptation of Timothy Zahn's novel Heir to the Empire, which Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra and Thrawn will all play a pivotal role in. It may be tempting to summarise by saying Andor is great, but it doesn't have force wielders and lightsaber fights, and that's why it's not as Star Wars-y as Ahsoka. And to some extent, that is true. It might sound slightly offensive to say that more colourful characters, more lightsaber fights, and spaceship battles make Ahsoka more Star Wars, but it's a fact. Star Wars is a space fairy tale. It's accessible to all, from children to adults. Ahsoka has this broad Star Wars, almost family appeal, something which the gritty HBO drama-esque Andor does not. I would also add that the hopefulness, the clear reverence Ahsoka has for past Star Wars, the pulpy action, fun adventurous plot, on top of the larger-than-life characters, is what undoubtedly makes Ahsoka a better Star Wars series than Andor. Now I'd like to know, what do you think? Do you agree that Andor is a better series, but Ahsoka is a better Star Wars series? Please let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, then perhaps consider subscribing to the channel. I review all the best films and shows, cover movie news and box office results, as well as the occasional video essay like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you again.